There's always that one character in Star Wars who shows up, drops a few cryptic lines, fights like a boss, and then vanishes faster than Disney's interest in coherent storytelling. For most people, Count Dooku is that guy. A walking question mark with a lightsaber shaped like a question mark. He's in and out of the prequels so fast, you'd think he was on loan from a better movie. But here's the thing. What if Dooku wasn't just another Sith villain? What if he was actually right the whole time? I know, it sounds crazy. The guy literally electrocuted people and built a murder bot with asthma. But think about it. He left the Jedi not out of hatred, but out of principle. That's not exactly a Sith origin story. That's more like your college roommate who read too much political theory and suddenly decided capitalism was a virus. Dooku saw the Jedi for what they'd become. Useless, bureaucratic, smug peacekeepers who couldn't even keep the peace in their own temple. And let's not ignore how the Jedi treated him like a family member they didn't invite to Life Day. He raised concerns, pointed out flaws, maybe yelled a little about corruption and secret Sith Lords running the Senate. And their response was basically, yes, troubling, followed by doing absolutely nothing. Honestly, if someone warned me the government was controlled by a Sith Lord, I'd at least send an email. But nope, Jedi just vibe. Meanwhile, Dooku's over here building a revolution. Yeah, okay, it spiraled into a galaxy-wide war, and maybe a few planets exploded. Details. The point is, he had a vision. He wanted to tear down a corrupt republic and start over. Which, in Star Wars terms, makes him either a prophet or a war criminal, depending on how cool your lightsaber is. But the deeper you go, the more you realize Dooku wasn't power-hungry. He was disillusioned, betrayed by the system he swore to protect, lied to by the Sith, who promised him answers, and forgotten by the Jedi, who should have stood by him when he needed them most. It's less evil mastermind and more heartbroken idealist with impeccable posture. And honestly, that hits a little too close to home. In this video, we're going to break down why Count Dooku's so-called fall from grace motive actually been a heroic stand against a galaxy in decay. We'll dive into the Jedi hypocrisy he exposed, the political rot he tried to fix, and the tragic path that led him straight into Palpatine's trap. So grab a drink, hide your asthmatic cyborgs, and let's talk about the most misunderstood rebel in Star Wars history. Let's talk about Count Dooku for a second. Not the cackling old dude from the prequels with the Sith eyes and the bent lightsaber. I mean the man behind the cape. The Jedi Master who voluntarily walked away from the Order and decided the galaxy needed something more than peace talks and bureaucracy. And if your first reaction is, but he turned to the dark side, then congratulations, you've swallowed the Jedi propaganda whole. Because, here's the thing. Dooku wasn't some angry teen with daddy issues, or a Sith junkie looking for power injections. He was a philosopher, a political reformist, a guy who looked at the Republic, saw a decaying corporate-run mess of a government, and went, yeah, I'm out. And honestly, can you blame him? If you were a Jedi, and the Supreme Chancellor was taking donations from the literal space mafia, you might raise an eyebrow too. And unlike Anakin, who went full murder-happy over nightmares and sand trauma, Dooku's fall was almost quiet. Intellectual even. He left the Jedi not because he hated them, but because he didn't believe in them anymore. That kind of conviction is rare in Star Wars, especially from someone wearing a cape. Usually capes mean instant villain status. But with Dooku, it was more like a mic drop. Think about how dangerous that made him. Not because he could do a triple backflip with a lightsaber, but because he knew things. He knew the Jedi were tools. He knew the Republic was compromised. He knew that the real threat wasn't some cartoonish Sith in a hood, it was the rot from within. And what do you do when you realize the institution you've sworn to is actively making things worse? You leave. Or if you're Dooku, you burn it all down first. So before we call him evil, maybe we should ask, what if Count Dooku wasn't the bad guy? What if he was just the only one paying attention? What if the guy we dismissed as a traitor was actually the only one telling the truth, but no one wanted to hear it? That's where this rabbit hole starts. And trust me, it gets deeper. Alright, here's where I get annoyed. Dooku saw the problems everyone else ignored, but instead of being hailed as a visionary, he gets dumped in the villain bin next to General Grievous and Space Dracula memes. The Jedi Order practically shoved him out the door, and then acted surprised when he didn't come back with a fruit basket. What did they expect him to journal his feelings and meditate it away? And now we get to the part that actually hurts, because Count Dooku wasn't some monster born in the shadows. He was a man molded by the light who watched it flicker and die. He trained under Yoda, he taught Qui-Gon, he believed in the Jedi once. That's what makes his fall so tragic. It wasn't a sudden snap, it was a slow disillusionment that no one cared enough to stop. Imagine being surrounded by people who preach wisdom and justice, only to realize they're more interested in sitting on council chairs than fixing anything. Dooku tried to work within the system. He raised concerns. He mentored others. But every time he spoke up, he was met with silence or scorn. And eventually, silence starts to sound like betrayal. He lost faith in the Republic, but it's the Jedi who broke his heart. When Qui-Gon died, Dooku didn't just mourn a student. He lost one of the last people who still believed there was another way. And instead of investigating the darkness that killed him, the Jedi practically shrugged and moved on. That's not strength. That's decay with a smile on its face. Even when Dooku joined the Separatists, you can still feel the pain in his choices. He wasn't some mustache-twirling warlord. He was still trying to steer the galaxy towards something better, even if the path got bloodier than he wanted. It's not just that he turned, it's that he felt he had to turn, because no one else would do what needed to be done. It's hard not to feel sympathy for someone who started out with so much hope, so much faith, and ended up a villain in everyone's eyes. Dooku's tragedy isn't just that he fell, it's that he was probably right, and being right didn't save him, it doomed him. Let's take a second to actually appreciate how powerful Count Dooku really was. Not just in terms of force abilities or lightsaber form though. Yeah, the guy made Force lightning look classy, but I mean the raw political, intellectual, and philosophical power this guy held. He wasn't just a Sith Lord. He was an ex-Jedi aristocrat with a spine of steel and a plan with teeth. He could go toe-to-toe with Yoda in a lightsaber duel, and also hold a Senate room hostage with just his words. Who else can do that? Palpatine's great at hiding, Vader's great at smashing. But Dooku was the one who played both sides, and knew what the stakes were. He wasn't just reacting to the system, he was actively trying to redesign it. His leadership of the Separatists wasn't a fluke either. Millions followed him because he wasn't some tyrant yelling about order. He was a statesman who gave the galaxy a new vocabulary, one that rejected corruption, bureaucracy, and Jedi negligence. That kind of influence doesn't come from fear. It comes from conviction. Real conviction. And here's the weird part. Despite everything, despite the war, the betrayal, the Sith allegiance, there's still something hopeful about Dooku's story, because he proved that even Jedi Masters could change their minds, that you could look at a broken system and say no more, that you didn't have to accept tradition just because it was old and robed in gold. Dooku shows us that rebellion doesn't always wear a black helmet or speak in absolutes. Sometimes it wears a cape and quotes philosophy. And even though his methods got twisted, the spark that started it all wasn't evil, it was purpose. It was clarity. And that's inspiring in its own messed up way. Because if he could challenge the Jedi, if he could stand up to Yoda and say, "You've lost your way," then maybe Star Wars isn't just about chosen ones and bloodlines. Maybe it's about people who dare to ask the hard questions, who refuse to follow orders when the orders stop making sense. Dooku may have fallen, but the cracks he pointed out never got sealed. If anything, they got worse. And that means his message wasn't erased. It was just postponed. Someone else could pick it up. Someone else should pick it up. Whether it's Ahsoka, or Ezra, or some random Force-sensitive kid in a galaxy far, far away. Hope doesn't have to come from heroes. Sometimes it comes from those brave enough to break the rules. Dooku didn't save the galaxy. But maybe, just maybe, he lit the match someone else will use to do it later. In the end, Dooku died on his knees. Not with a monologue, not with rage, just a moment of shock, a flash of betrayal, and a quiet understanding that he'd been played. He gave everything to a cause, only to realize the cause had never truly existed. The man who once challenged the Jedi and the Republic was reduced to a pawn in the very game he tried to escape. That's the true tragedy of Count Dooku. He wasn't corrupted by power, he was consumed by purpose. And that purpose was hijacked by someone far more ruthless. He thought he could use the Sith to reshape the galaxy. But instead, he handed it to the Emperor on a silver platter. All his warnings, all his sacrifices, wasted. But here's what sticks with me. Even in failure, Dooku mattered. He exposed the flaws in the Republic. He shook the foundations of the Jedi, and while no one listened in time, the echoes of his choices still ripple through the galaxy. In a way, his fall was the warning shot that everyone ignored, and the cost of ignoring it was Order 66. Dooku reminds us that not every villain starts with evil in their heart. Sometimes they start with clarity, with pain, with vision, and the galaxy just isn't ready for it, until it's too late. He could have been the one to fix it all. But instead, he died in silence, framed as a traitor, remembered as a Sith. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.